Isaiah 41:10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Context. This verse is part of Isaiah's prophecy offering comfort and encouragement to the people of Israel during times of hardship. Breakdown. Do not fear. God is calling his people to trust in him and not to be afraid. I am with you. This emphasizes God's presence and companionship. I am your God. This reminds the people of God's sovereignty and power. I will strengthen you. God's promise to provide strength and support in times of difficulty. I will help you. God's promise to assist and guide his people. I will uphold you. God's promise to sustain and protect his people. Practical application. Trust in God's presence. Believe that God is always with you, even in difficult times. Seek God's guidance. Turn to God for direction and support. Embrace God's strength. Trust that God will provide the strength you need to overcome challenges. Find comfort in God's love, knowing that God loves you deeply and cares for your well-being. Share God's hope. Encourage others to trust in God and find hope in his promises. Key takeaways. God is a source of strength, comfort, and support. We can trust God's presence and guidance. God's love and power are sufficient to sustain us through any trial. Additional thoughts. This verse offers hope and encouragement to anyone facing challenges in life. By trusting in God, we can find strength and peace even in the midst of adversity. Isaiah 41:10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand.
I think to be a man, you should stand for something. Whatever it is that you stand for it. And to be a man is to stand up for the people who are weak, to take a stance against people who would prey on the vulnerable, to stand for innocence, and to put others before yourself. And the rest is just details.
I think that's a pretty good definition, brother. Have enough strength to give it, stand in the gap, whatever that gap happens to be, know who you are and what you believe, and live that way. I think that's a pretty good definition.
Just had that conversation with my son a few days ago.
Yeah.
About people who open themselves up or who are vulnerable. There are people who will take advantage of that, and there are people who will stand to protect that. A good person stands to protect it.
I think that's one of the biggest things we're missing in society. In a metaphorical sense, there's a lot of wolves running around and there's very few sheepdogs anymore. The sheepdogs are there, they're just not standing together. So the wolves are having their way with the world. And I think that's a tragedy, and I think it can change, and I think it should change. What is a man? Book of the Brother, page 13. Starting at the beginning and rolling on through. Last week we talked about what it means to be human. We are image bearers of God. But as image bearers of God, we're called to honor that and understand that everyone that we look at, every set of eyes, whether we like them or not, are also image bearers of God, to treat them accordingly. We've got a certain set of responsibilities that align with that. We are to live them. This week, what is a man? Being a man is not merely defined as a biological or genetic markers, genitalia, or age, but by a progression of personal development, responsibility, and purpose. It involves a journey of maturation that unfolds in stages: son, brother, and father. Gamma Alpha Pi. Weird. Each stage represents a different set of biological and emotional and mental challenges. Each requires a man to fulfill different roles in his personal life and relationship to the community around him. This journey is marked by growth, learning, and assumption of responsibility and service to others. Biological maturation versus mental maturation. Biological maturation. Biological maturation follows a fairly standard path as men go through stages of childhood, puberty, adulthood, and physical markers such as growth spurts, development of sexual characteristics, increased strength. However, while biological maturation is inevitable, it is often externally visible, it does not automatically equate to mental and emotional maturity. Physical growth does not mean a man is ready to take on the challenges of adulthood or assume his role as protector and provider and leader. I think this is one of the biggest things we see societally, as we have a lot of adult males that are not men. The guys running around New York punching women, not men. People that take advantage of others because they can impose their will physically on them, not men. Adult males perhaps, but not men. Mental and emotional maturation. Mental and emotional maturation, on the other hand, is more than a complex process that unfolds over time. It's deeply influenced by experiences, choices, and the way a man engages with his responsibilities. A man's ability to understand himself, others, and the world around him determines his growth and role as a son, brother, and father. This maturation is essential for his capacity to build relationships, lead others, and fulfill his life's purpose. Mental and emotional allows a man to rise above his mere physicality and develop a depth needed for leadership, service, and legacy. Infancy and Early Childhood 0 to 3. Developmental focus, attach, trust, and foundational cognitive emotional development. Key tasks 0 to 1. Formation of attachment to caregivers and development of trust with infants rely heavily on their caregivers for survival, emotional bonding, and physical needs. Dads, if you're listening, super important you spend time with the babies. It doesn't seem like a whole lot, and I know they're scary. I didn't really like holding little babies when I was having kids. Afraid I was going to break them. But it's super important to their life and stability to use that 0 to 1 time to bond with you. 1 to 3, emergency of self-awareness, language acquisition, and the beginning of motor skill development. The toddler begins assertion of independence with behaviors such as exploration, first signs of personality, and temperaments forming. This is another critical phase in life. As they start separating from mom and they start gaining mobility and independence, super important for dads to roughhouse and do dad play with the little kids, boys and girls both. You're super important for your kids' development all the way through. And this is part of the reason the core values in this era of development that are developed are trust, security, and basic needs fulfillment. This stage is about laying the foundation of trust and attachment. The infant's role is to rely on the caregivers. The primary focus of survival, emotional with attachment, or early experiences with attachment, influence emotional development throughout life. 0 to 3 period. Preschool, ages 3 to 7. Before we dig into this, the Jesuits say, give me a child, and by the time of the 7, they will not turn from the way. And this is why. Developmental focus, socialization, imagination, and the formation of self-identity. Key tasks 3 to 5. Development of social skills, understanding of basic social societal rules. Children begin to form friendships and engage in pretend and play, which fosters creativity and empathy. Their self-concept begins to take shape as they learn about their abilities, emotions, and individuality. 5 to 7. Formal education begins with learning how to read, write, engage with peers in a structured environment. They also start to understand the rules and concepts of fairness, which shape their emotional compass. Core values, exploration, imagination, learning, and belonging. Purpose. At this stage, a child is discovering their place in the world. Their primary role is to learn through play, socialization, and exploration. Their identity as individuals begins to form through their interactions with others, and they start to understand how their actions affect the world around them, who they are in the world. There's a really interesting study put on by NASA. There was a guy and a girl that did the study on a lot of different children. They followed children for several decades, and the initial finding was 98% of kids under 8 are geniuses. Only 4% of adults above 30 are geniuses. And in following the same kids, they saw the drop-off rate. So at this point in kids' lives, they have essentially unlimited potential, depending on their self-confidence formed in the first 3 years and how they see themselves in the world. Skills such as problem-solving, understanding complex instructions, gaining knowledge through education. They also form deep relationships with friends and are increasingly influenced by peer interactions. 9 through 12, the child starts refining intellectual abilities, greater focus on school performance, critical thinking, and developing of hobbies and interests. Their social world expands as they navigate more complex peer relationships, and they begin to understand their role within groups, families, schools, sports, etc. Core values, learning responsibility, social competence, and teamwork. Purpose, middle school children is about developing competence in various areas. A child begins to gain confidence in their abilities, and the role in the family and social world becomes more defined. They are working toward becoming a contributing member of their social and academic environments. In raising kids, this is one of the toughest periods to get through because they start really making the transition from individuation of themselves up there in the 3 to 5 area, and then individuation from their parents in the 5 to 7 era, and now they're doing a reintegration, but it's outside the nuclear family and trying to find their identity in their peer group on the outside. It's a fairly hard transition for kids to make. Adolescence, 13 to 18. This one isn't any easier. Developmental focus, identity formation, independence, and self-discovery. Key task establishing a sense of self, seeking autonomy, navigating peer relationships, and developing personal values. Core values, exploration, self-expression, and boundaries. Purpose, the adolescent begins to separate from the family unit and explore the wider world, developing in beginnings of a life path and identity. This is often time of testing limits and discovering passions and skills. Aaron, what was your 13 to 18 period like?
It was hell.
Yeah? I think it's rough for a lot of boys.
Well, I was raised by a man with paranoid schizophrenia, so my childhood isn't anything close to normal.
That would probably be pretty intense.
And it's not the best. I learned a lot, and had some pretty traumatic experiences. Was taught a lot of things the old way. Was taught a lot of older values
Yeah?
the old way, and I found myself having to be the man in the house. Unfair, unfortunate, and unforeseen ways many times, and I didn't even understand it then. Like, because whenever you're isolated, you don't understand the degree of trauma or abuse that you're in until you're like older. I have my own kids, and I'm like, I could never say those things, do those things, be that way to my own kids. I start to realize, um, just like how crappy it was. But I like I left home when I was 17,
Oh,
got my own apartment, graduated high school early, started taking college, turned 18 and went to the Navy. So my 13 to 18-year old period is definitely not normal or probably what most other people go through. I'm sure there's a lot of people that went through similar situations, but definitely not the norm.
you probably got the individuation and imposition of responsibility probably changed your development cycle relatively significantly.
I didn't
So,
really understand responsibility until later, like
yeah.
in my 20s.
We had responsibility, it just didn't, it was different.
Well, there's a difference, right? Like if you're taking on responsibility out of the nature of understanding what responsibility is
Right.
versus taking on responsibility because if you don't, you're gonna get the shit kicked out of you. Games.
They're two different games.
And with two different sets of like, and this is something that took me a long time to figure out, but the things that I had to do when I was a kid, the responsibilities that I had, and if I didn't accomplish them, then I was gonna get my head thumped. Then when you get out and there is nobody there to thump your head, then the responsibilities don't really show themselves as responsibilities. Like if you're not gonna beat my ass, then why would I have to take care of it, right?
Right.
And in the military, you do have somebody there to beat your ass basically, but not physically. But
Sure.
like if you don't take care of your responsibilities, there are consequences. But they're short-term consequences that are imposed by direct authority, right? Not worldly consequences. And if you don't, the rest of the response, especially in the military, like if you are not responsible in the military, you're still gonna have a place to eat, to sleep. You're still gonna have food to eat. Like there's actually less like consequences for the non-military oriented responsibilities.
Right.
And so it was all jacked up for me. And then when I got in the real world, understanding world consequences were not direct authority implemented consequences, but like real world consequences took some time.
No food.
So I,
Lights go off. They take your car.
yeah,
Go to jail.
that kind of shit was never really instituted because the only consequences that I faced, like in the time period you're speaking of, was a 2x4 to the head, a belt to the ass, a fan belt to the fucking face, whatever. And then in the military, the only responsibilities I had to worry about were military oriented. Get my qualifications done, pass my PRT, make sure my uniform is in standard, make sure my appearance is in standard, don't do drugs, don't show up drunk. These are just all core basic, show up on time. These are core responsibilities. And I had a lot of responsibilities, especially later on in the military. Like there was a lot of responsibilities, but they weren't real world
A little bit. You touched on it. So, as a young person, and this is kind of where that gets real obvious for people, whether they're leaving the house or going into the military or going off to college, as a real time of rude awakening for a lot of folks. If kids don't have the exploration of responsibilities and consequences with mom and dad at home, And it's just consequences, right? It's super tight direction and consequences at home, or they go into the military. When they get out from under that hyper structure and those significant consequences, and they're out in the world, not knowing how to make decisions, not knowing how to set priorities, not knowing how to essentially take care of themselves, right? Waiting for direction. If they don't have the direction, they don't have the box to check, they struggle. And that happens a lot at college. People get off to college, there's no one to make them go to bed, there's no one to make them get up, there's no one to make them do their homework, and they fail. They get out into the job world, there's no one to make them get up, there's no one to make them go to work, there's no one to make them do anything, and they struggle. And it's a lot of people struggle because they don't have that. It is structure,
Well,
but it's a different
let's
structure.
continue on that, because that's a big part of the problem of today, because that continues on, right? So
Yes,
then they have kids,
yes,
and they don't understand the responsibility of that. They think that raising a child is just like growing a plant. Just got to feed it and make sure it's sheltered, and then it's just going to grow up. And then you have a whole generation of kids that are missing out on that core curriculum. And the next generation is missing that and then some.
yeah.
And you have this.
It's a downward spiral. There's a lot of reasons I'm doing Eos, Adelphos, Patera, son, brother, father. A lot of what we're facing is generational decline. And there's only one way to change it, and that's to address it directly. It's part of the reason I go into these developmental phases. It's not something that's taught, really. It's not something you can understand just by accident, by happenstance. It is generational, and the only way to address it is generational. It starts with awareness. We remember the things that we struggled with, but not necessarily why. Not understanding that our confidence came from how we were treated by the time we were 3, and how we see ourselves in our world, how we were treated from up to the time we were 7. But parents don't know that. They don't teach that. It's not Adobe. It's not something anybody teaches. It's part of the reason I'm addressing it specifically. My teenage years were fairly same. Marine father, pretty intense. Construction company, free labor and all that. Pretty intense. And I started a lot earlier than my teenage years. It was pretty intense. Then we were free to the world. 19 to 30. Developmental focus, establishing a career, relationships, and personal goals. Key tasks, pursuing education, training, forming romantic relationships, establishing career paths, and seeking deeper self-understanding. A lot of those things are missing in most men's lives. A lot of it is just education, get a job. Form romantic relationships is kind of by accident. Establishing a career path kind of aligns with getting a job. Seeking deeper self-understanding doesn't even register. Core values, independence, ambition, establishing identity through achievement. Purpose. This phase is marked by the quest for purpose, where men often search for careers, relationships, and social roles that define their future. Relationships, especially romantic partnerships and friendships, become more deeply meaningful, and a man's role in society begins to solidify. Men don't really fully mature mentally or until around 27. We're old enough and big enough and hairy enough to carry guns and go to war, but our brains aren't really done baking until around 25, 27, depending on the guy. That can be advanced significantly through stressful childhood upbringings, etc., various other variables. But for the most part, most men's brains aren't done baking until 25, 27. Concurrently, women are done baking around 18, 19. It's part of their frustration with us in this period of our lives. Talk about seeking purpose. This is one of the other big things that I've sought to address in all this, is the purpose we're taught to seek is generally attainment of things, status. You're the car you drive, your title, how much money you make, the house you live in, all that other stuff, which really has very little to do with purpose. And that's part of the reason so many people live hollow lives, is that's what they were taught purpose is. It's not there. And it's actually a road to nowhere that we get put on at 1,000 miles an hour. Adulthood, 31 to 50. Developmental focus, building family, career, and community. Key tasks, establishing a stable family life, advancing a career, contributing to the well-being of society. Men often become fathers, mentors, and leaders in their communities. Core values, responsibility, productivity, and leadership. This phase is centered around producing and providing. It is this service to others, raising children, building relationships, and securing a future for oneself and one's family. The man is now a primary contributor to the well being of others and is learning how to balance personal and collective responsibilities. That's the goal, anyways. Another thing that we could use a lot of mentorship for. How's your journey in the 31 to 50 going, Aaron? You feel like you're tracking in that phase?
I'm well, I'm doing the family thing, right? So that
Indeed,
tracks.
that
But
tracks.
I'm not enamored by the
You don't need the status symbols.
material world, right? Like the material world doesn't really enamor me. Um, I'm more my biggest focus is trying to build a cohesive family. I don't care about a big house. I'd rather share a small house with my kids until they're in their 30s if they want to. Which a lot of people are like, what? That's weird, blah blah blah, independence, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not this
It's
game of
actually not
independence.
weird. For the
This
millions of
game of
years as you go ahead.
well, the game of independence is a societal game that is played by people who profit off of independence.
Facts. For the millions of years of human evolution, we have cohabitated in multi-generational housing up until about 100 years ago. So this whole every generation moves out at 18 only really started in the 50s, 60s.
Hmm.
So it's actually
Yeah, it's very new.
yeah, it's very very new. And there's a lot of cultures still live multi-generationally in housing, and some of them have brought the practice to the United States. And you'll see young guys driving really nice cars and living in massive homes. And it's hard to understand why or how, but mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and all the other brothers, that's why they're massive homes. You
Right.
got 10, 12 people living there. But they're quite comfortable because 10, 12 people of working age can make a lot of money. And it makes it real easy when they have common overhead. If you look at it like a business, it, it's what do they call that? Efficiencies of scale. Instead of having 12 discrete overheads, they have one singular overhead. For independence makes it challenging, but being on your own without sufficient income is also extremely challenging. So,
Well, my grandpa, which is my biological great grandfather, my grandpa Heston, he built a farm and had built homes or bought property nearby for all of his children.
yeah,
Everybody was there together, and he grew up in a family that was like that on a farm in Iowa. Of course, he went to World War II. When he came out of the war after World War II, he did the baby boomer thing, right? So he started a business, bought a house, started a family, and all that. Um, but he could see in his time, he could see where things were headed, and he could see the benefit of a cohesive family unit.
sure,
And that doesn't mean that everybody has to get along all the time or whatever, right? But there's a common family goal of keeping a homestead and a foundation under the family. And when he died, it all fell apart.
sure,
Well, my wife's father, her family out here, they're doing the same thing. They have this family property. Everybody's kind of living out here. Everybody's kind of working together. Everybody does their own part and pitches in. If the world hits one of us in the ass, then there's a whole multitude of resources
to pick
and
up the slack. Absolutely,
to pick up the slack,
you got a
right?
whole built-in community. It's uh, it's tragic that we don't have that everywhere.
It is tragic, and that's part of like the establishment's purpose to break that is because they need to sell houses because houses need to be built because people need to make money building houses and people need to make money on
Loans,
selling houses and selling cars and selling loans. And then if you're all separated, then if somebody gets sick, you're going to need insurance because you don't have, six incomes there to help carry somebody through a sickness. So then you make money off of insurance, and then also you don't have a cohesive ideology, right? So that's a big thing. You don't want the powers that be, and you can put on your tinfoil hat if you want to, but the powers that be are not interested in having a cohesive community with the same brain because same brains have a tendency to see through bullshit, and they don't want that. There is literally a game of bread and circus about this country that depends upon individual people having individual thoughts and individual homes with individual, like even marriage these days. So many people that are married these days have their own independent bank accounts and they all split the bills. They're basically fucking roommates, right? And it's sad because they could be so much stronger together. They could if pooling resources and carrying slack for each other is literally the purpose of marriage, and it's literally the purpose of community, and it's literally the purpose of the human
Family.
race and
Yeah.
society as a whole.
Yeah.
And what we have now as a common structure, societal structure, is the opposite of that. And stand alone like Atlas with the world on their shoulders and carry through and bear all these burdens. And that's really not what it was. It's not what it's meant to be. What it's meant to be a man is to be shoulder to shoulder with the other men of a
Yes.
community, to bear burdens together
Yes.
and to carry your brothers when they are down and to allow yourself to be carried when you are down.
Yes.
And that's missing. That's
Yes.
missing. And there so many men are buried under these weight of burdens because they're trying to carry a whole community's worth of burdens on their single set of shoulders,
With no
and they
guidance
think
and no
because they
mentors
fail
and no models.
that they're not right, because they fail they're not a man all of a sudden, and then that leads to a whole set of mental issues and depression
Yeah.
and all these other things. And you have all of these influences on the media and entertainment and all sorts of commercial and marketing influences that tell you if you're a real man, you wouldn't do that. If you're a real man, you'd have your own stuff. If you're a real man, you'd do this alone. If you're a real man, you're not going to ask for help. If you're a real man, da 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 da.
Yeah.
And that's all toxic bullshit. That's really not what it is at all. A real man does think on his own, but he thinks for the betterment of others. And if a man is meant to think for the betterment of others, then who are those others to be? It can't be a single unit that makes a man if you're supposed to put others before yourself. Because if you're single unit as a man, then there's no others around you to put before yourself. That makes no sense.
We're built to serve
So,
each other. Our gifts are not for
right,
us, they're for those around us.
right.
Yep, I agree with
So
everything you said.
my grandpa understood that, and after he died, the rest of the people afterward, and my dad that raised me, he didn't understand that. Um, if he did understand it, his sickness wouldn't allow him to propagate that in his own life. And so the result of that was the farm fell apart, sold, split up, and now he's alone and he's suffering consequences of those decisions. Because there comes a point in every man's life, and you're going to get to it right after 50, when you're not physically capable of doing those things by yourself. You're simply not. You're not capable of it. And so what are you supposed to do then, right? And if a man builds a family and community, then when you reach those ages, where you've lost that physical ability and you've lost your, you know, presence and influence in society, because at a certain point in time, you're no longer influence in society. You could have all the intelligence and all the smarts you want, and unless you're one in a million, the world does not give a fuck what you think, because they don't care what you say or what you've done in your life. And when you reach that point as a man, who's to be there to take care of you if you've done it all alone your whole life?
If you've done it well, the young backs, the teenage boys that need guidance, the 30s and 50-year-olds that are getting ready to make those transitions in life, the young fathers and the old fathers. You have a whole community and broad family there to stand beside you, and you still contribute, right? So that's where we're going next, right? But you're still contributing. You're just contributing differently to young men, and it's incredibly valuable to families, new families, and communities, because you stepped in enough crap that you learned where the crap is and how to not step in it, and what to do when you do step in it. And if you were very fortunate, you had wise men that guided you, and you can pass down the wisdom of generations. Every age has a place in society if it is understood and honored. So to that, middle adulthood, 51 to 65, key developmental focus, reflection, reevaluation, and mentorship. Reflecting on life's achievements, adjusting to changing physical and social roles, and often transitioning to a role of mentoring younger generations. Men may experience a midlife crisis during which they reassess their goals and dreams. Core values: wisdom, legacy, and generativity. Purpose: a man begins to shift from personal achievement towards contributing to the next generation. His role is now one of mentoring, guiding, and supporting younger men in their journey. Their focus is less on building and more on sustaining and mentoring. Late adult focus. This is legacy and letting go. This is nobody talks about this, but this is super important in families and communities. Meaning, reviewing achievements and regrets, and transitioning into a more contemplative role. This phase also often involves significant change, including retirement, loss of loved ones, and physical decline. Core values: acceptance, peace, and wisdom. In this phase, the man often focuses on leaving a legacy, whether through a family or community contribution or wisdom shared with others. It is a time of reflection on what has been accomplished and on what is yet to be done. The purpose is often centered around acceptance of life's journey and contributing to the well-being of those who will carry on the legacy. This is the last phase and something that we all must face. Death and legacy, the end of life. Closure. Developmental focus: closure, legacy, and passing on wisdom. Key tasks: coming to terms with mortality, passing on knowledge and wisdom, and ensuring a lasting legacy. This phase involves a final reflection on a man's life and impact on the world. Core values: completion, legacy, and transcendence. The purpose of this phase is to leave a legacy, whether through family, community contributions, or wisdom shared with others. It is the final chapter of the journey, where the individual contemplates the meaning of his life and the ripples he has made in the lives of others. I think this is one of the biggest things we've lost over the past 2 generations, and we're losing it currently now. The older men in their 60s and 70s do not prepare to let go, and they hold on to the wheel all the way into the ground. And in doing so, they never teach anyone else to take the wheel. And in not teaching anyone else to take the wheel, no one is prepared. So not only does the ship run aground, there is no one left that knows how to steer it. They're all busy building their own ships. Going back to our earlier conversation, had there been considerance of a legacy and transcendence, one generation building upon the next, and not just financially, but in terms of wisdom, in terms of community, in terms of family. Just as you described, when the grandfather died, the family fell apart. It doesn't have to be that way. We can transition from one generation to the next successfully and for the betterment of every generation that is to come. But it does mean that we have to accept our own mortality. We have to accept the burden of responsibility, just like we accepted as young men, as not just for ourselves, our own legacy, but for the developmental journey of a man, the acquisition of skills, wisdom, and values designed to shape him into a complete person that contributes meaningfully to the world. These stages, particularly in the early years, form the foundation upon which the later years of responsibility, leadership, and service are built. The ultimate goal is to live a life of purpose, one defined by service to God, family, and community. Phases of a man's life: son, brother, and father. Eos. The early phase of a man's life is defined by dependency. As a son, a man is learning to navigate, absorb knowledge, and build a foundation of who he will become. He is dependent on others, typically his parents or caregivers, for his survival, safety, and guidance. His main role is to grow, learn, and understand his place in the world. Biological markers: the son experiences rapid growth from infancy into early childhood and into adolescence, with changes in physical development and the onset of puberty. Mental and emotional maturation: His emotional and mental development is marked by the need for attachment, trust, and security. He is learning the basis of empathy, communication, and self-awareness. His identity is still being formed, shaped by family, education, and his immediate environment. And this stage of man's journey is one of receiving, learning from those around him, and absorbing the values and lessons he is taught, and beginning to understand the world and his role within it. He has not yet assumed the responsibility for others, and he is still in the process of learning to care for himself. Brother. Responsibility and leadership. As a man matures, he enters in the phase of becoming a brother. This stage is marked by a shift from dependence to responsibility. As a brother, or simply a man in a broader sense, he begins to take responsibility for himself and assume a leadership role within his family and his social circle and his community. He is no longer merely a learner, but begins to apply what he has learned to create value, protect the. This isn't the younger lion killing the older lion. This is a man taking ownership of himself and beginning to teach those that he can. So the younger men coming up behind him, the teenagers. Biological markers. A man matures into adulthood, his body reaches full physical strength. This stage sees completion of his biological growth, and his body is capable of handling the responsibility he will face. Mental and emotional maturation. His emotional maturity deepens as he learns balance and independence with compassion. He begins to understand and manage his emotions. That's actually a goal that most men don't actually hit. Make difficult decisions and take on a more prominent role in guiding others. His mind is focused not just on personal achievement but contributing to the welfare of others. As a brother or man, he is called to take on the role of protector, provider, and leader. This is where he moves from a focus of himself to a focus on other people around him. He assumes his role in the community, serving, building, and leading in ways that benefit others. He becomes a creator of value, whether through his work, relationships, or contributions to the world. His growth is marked by learning how to be accountable not only for himself, but for those who depend on him. Father. Ultimate responsibility and sacrifice. The final phase of a man's life is that of a father. This is the stage where a man fully embraces responsibility, not just for himself, but for his family, his legacy, and his community. As a father, a man is called to provide, to protect, guide, and model the life he hopes his children will lead. Biological markers. Physically, a man may begin to experience signs of aging, but the role of fatherhood requires him to be at his peak in terms of maturity, wisdom, and stability. His biological the next generation. Mental and emotional maturation. As a father, his emotional and mental growth comes from selflessness. He sacrifices his own desires for the sake of his children's well-being, guidance, and success. His focus shifts away from his own goals to nurturing and developing of others. As fathers, the job is not to provide materially, but to offer emotionally and spiritual guidance. He models the type of man his children will become and sets the tone for their future relationships and values. The relationships he models with his wife will shape his children's expectations for their own relationships. A father's love and leadership influences not only his family, but also his community. Fatherhood is about understanding the weight of responsibility and committing to it fully, knowing that personal desires and needs have to be set aside for the sake of others. A father's greatest fulfillment comes from seeing his children grow into successful, capable, and compassionate individuals who carry on the legacy of values and wisdom he imparted. Rising to your full potential. To be a man is to embrace the journey through each phase: son, brother, and father. As a son, you learn to grow. As a brother, you take on responsibility, creating value and leading others. As a father, you lay down your desires for the greater good of your family and community, modeling the life and values you wish to see carried on by the next generation. Being a man is a continual process of learning, maturing, and giving. Your life is not just about your own success, but about how you serve others, your family, your community, and your God. The journey is not easy, but it is deeply fulfilling. You need you, your family needs you, your community needs you. It is time to rise. The Bible provides numerous insights into what it means to be a man, emphasizing both the inherent dignity and responsibility of manhood. From creation to Christ's example, the scriptures paint a picture of what God intends for men in their relationships with Him, others, and themselves. Man is created in God's image. As stated in Genesis 1:26-27, man is created in the image of God. This truth signifies that men are uniquely endowed with qualities that reflect the nature of God's character, such as rationality, creativity, moral agency, and relational capacity. Being made in God's image, men are called to live with purpose and dignity, embodying the attributes of God in their thoughts, words, and actions. Men as a provider and protector. From the beginning, God tasked Adam with the responsibility of providing and protecting for creation. In Genesis 2:15, God places Adam in the Garden of Eden to work and take care of it. This role of provider and protector is further emphasized in the New Testament, where men are called to provide for their families and lead in their households. 1 Timothy 5:8. Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied their faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Being a man means taking responsibility for the physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being of those entrusted to you, especially your family. It is not about providing material resources, but also about nurturing and guiding around you in a way that reflects God's care and love. That was kind of a lot to chew on. Any thoughts that come up in that section or sections?
I think the biggest thought for me is that you said it's not about providing materially, but when you provide spiritually, you are providing spiritually or materially.
Yes.
So, and materially doesn't mean like giving material things. It means survival, right? So there are necessary materials in life, and then there are extravagance. So when you provide for your children spiritually and give them the guidance, the material things, the material necessities come. But yeah, I agree with everything.
Or to leave in a legacy, or to leave an inheritance for our children's children. A lot of people take that as purely financial, but the inheritance for our children's children is something we leave the legacy of our whole selves, right? Like you said, mentally,
Right.
emotionally, spiritually. Financially is part of that, but it's only a part. And it's not even the biggest
Well,
part.
I still speak about my Grandpa Heston, to this very
Sure.
day. And I didn't get anything financially from him, but the things that I got could not be bought, which was an understanding and a respect for family and a respect for a family community. And I intend to pass that on to my own kids.
Sure.
So that's exactly where I think that's way more important than an inheritance, because like
It is an
using my
inheritance.
own life as an example, if you look at the people that did benefit financially from when the farm was sold, that money's gone.
Sure.
The money's gone, and now the farm is split up, and there's nothing left for anybody else. And that money didn't last very long.
It doesn't.
It never does. So they could have taken that inheritance and kept it and prepared for their own children and their children's children. But they didn't. The moment they got it, within less than a month, it was sold. And then 3 months after that, for most of them, the money was gone.
Sure.
And there were, except for a couple of them, that died before they could spend it. And people were complaining about, well, I didn't get my inheritance until it was too late. Well, what do you mean? The inheritance is not for you to fucking spend. Inheritance is meant to be a part of your accumulation for your own children. And they're not leaving anything for their kids either.
Yeah.
And their kids start building things for their kids. Well, I can't say that about everybody, but for the most part. But I'm out here and I didn't get a damn dime. But I took what I could from it and I'm passing it on. So
Well, it's not just money though, and it's not just spirituality. It's how one of my favorite parts that I included in that was it's about the relationships and how you model relationships, right? And since writing this, I've come to understand it's much deeper than that. It's not just modeling the relationship you have with your wife and how you treat your wife. You're literally modeling how to live. You're modeling the life, especially when they're young, even when they're older, but especially when they're young. You're modeling how to live. What they see you do is what they will do, good or bad. Monkey see, monkey do, and there are monkeys watching you. And it's not just your own children. The people in the community also see you. Believe it or not, you have a lot more influence than you think you do. Every person that you touch, every person that you interact with, you influence in some way, good and likely and bad. But it is a real responsibility of service. This leads us right into the next phase. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Man as a leader. In both the home and in the broader community, the Bible calls men to lead with humility and wisdom. Ephesians 5:23. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church. This leadership is not or control, but sacrificial service. Just as Christ leads the church by serving and loving it selflessly, men are called to lead by example, guiding their families and communities in a way that promotes truth, righteousness, and justice. Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Men are called to build each other up, hold one another accountable in faith and action. This kind of leadership requires integrity, self-discipline, and a willingness to serve others. On that accountability is not trying to make someone else live up to your standards. And I'm not saying you let a wolf get away with being a predator, but trying to impose how your values and principles on someone else is not accountability. That's you being an asshole. Now, if someone comes to you and says, this is the kind of man I wish to be and how I wish to behave, and you see them not being that man or behaving that way, calling them on their BS, that's accountability. But you still got to do that in love, out of service. Not in dominance, not in some hierarchical status, not to make yourself feel better or look better. It's not something you do in front of other people. Accountability is a service. It's not an imposition. It's not about status. Man is a lover of God and others. The Bible consistently calls men to love God with all their hearts, soul, and mind, as seen in Matthew 22:37. A man is not only called to love God, but also to demonstrate that love by obeying his commands and living a life that reflects his character. Men are also called to love others, especially their families. Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. This love is sacrificial, patient, and unconditional. Loving others as Christ loves the church requires men to be selfless, forgiving, and humble. A man is called to put others before himself, just as Christ did for us. This love extends to the broader community, where men are to serve and sacrifice for the common good, reflecting God's heart and humility. So, this doesn't mean that you are to destroy yourself. You cannot serve if you have destroyed yourself. You have to take care of yourself and understand your principles and values. Understand who you are, your purpose and mission, and from that, serve. That takes on 1,000 different flavors, 1 billion different flavors. What is it, 8 billion different people on the world? So 8 billion different versions of that. There will be some that walk similar paths to you, some with similar gifts. But your life is your mission, and you have your service. Understand it. Understand who you are, what your purpose and mission is, and live it. Your gifts are not for you. Your gifts are to give. You have to know them. Know yourself. Noscata ipsum. Take care of yourself so you can serve. Man is a protector of his family and community. Manhood in the Bible involves taking responsibility to protect and care for others, particularly within the context of family and community. 1 Peter 3:7. Husbands are called to be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you in the gracious gift of life. What it means by weaker partner is physically weaker. If a thief comes, it should not be to your wife to protect the family. She has her strength and you have yours. Part of yours is physical strength. Use it, not against her. This verse highlights the need for men to protect their families, emotionally and physically, while offering respect and care. This protective role extends beyond the home into society. Psalm 82, 3-4. Defend the cause of the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the rights of the poor and the oppressed. Men are to stand against injustice and be advocates for those who cannot defend themselves. When the wolves come, we are to stand. Men is disciplined and self-controlled. The Bible speaks about the importance of self-control in a man's life. Proverbs 25:28. Like a city whose walls are broken through, a person who lacks self-control. A man is called to be disciplined in his thoughts, words, and actions, and live in alignment with God's will. Galatians 5:22-23 lists self-control as the fruit of the Spirit, indicating that this virtue is cultivated in a man's life through the work of the Holy Spirit. Men are called to exercise control over their desires, making choices that honor God and build up those around them. Man is a servant. Jesus provides the ultimate example of manhood through his servant leadership, Matthew 20:26. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not serve. True manhood is marked by the willingness to serve others selflessly and sacrificially, following the example set by Christ. This is evident in the way that a man serves his family, his community, and the body of Christ. Man is a discipler and teacher. 2 Timothy 2:2. Paul tells Timothy to entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. Men are called to pass the truth of God's word to others, whether through their children, fellow believers, or the wider community. This is a responsibility not just for pastors, but for every man who follows Christ. By teaching and discipling others, men help raise up the next generation and contribute to the flourishing of the church and society.
To be a man doesn't mean to have a big house, to have big muscles, to do all these different things. To be a man means to stand up for innocence, stand to stand for those who are weak, the vulnerable. That's the core part of being a man. And when you have children, that is the vulnerable, right? Your kids are vulnerable.
It is.
It isn't just because your kids are your kids, but because of their innocence and their vulnerabilities. A man should preserve innocence at all costs.
Yes.
And that's what Adam was doing in the garden.
Defend the cause of the weak and fatherless. Maintain the rights of the poor and oppressed. Men are to stand against injustice and be advocates for those who cannot defend themselves. It is our responsibility to stand when the wolves come. It is our responsibility. It's what it means to be a man.
Right.
Take
It isn't to be big, bad, strong, loud.
Nope.
It's to be the barrier between
The bulwark.
yeah.
To stand in the gap.
Stand in the gap. Stand up for the ones that can't stand up for themselves.
And whether your gift is mental strength, physical strength, financial strength, ideally if you're a relatively whole man, you're going to be stronger in one area than the other. It's just how it is. But whatever strength you have, use it. You're given that gift for a reason. Use it. Stand in the gap. Take responsibility for yourself, responsibility for your family, and responsibility for your community. And really, especially in this time, it means everyone. We really are a global community now. But first, those you can touch. Defend the cause of the weak and fatherless. Maintain the rights of the poor and the oppressed. Men are to stand against injustice and be advocates for those who cannot defend themselves. So I said earlier, these adult males running around punching women in the face, they're not men. Adult males perhaps, but they are not men. And the lack of men allows them to do that behavior. If men were honoring their responsibility, that wouldn't happen so much. A man is a disciplined and self-controlled. The Bible speaks about the importance of self-control in a man's life. Proverbs 5:28. Like a city's... Oh, I already did this. Man is a servant. Did I do that one already? Man is a disciple and teacher. I did that. Man is a follower of Christ. That's where I left off. To be a man is a biblical sense of what is the call to follow Christ. Luke 9:23. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow me. True masculinity is rooted in humility, surrender, and submission to the will of God. A man is called to follow Christ's example, growing in his likeness, and seeking to do his will in all things. Being a man, according to the Bible, is not defined by external standards or cultural expectations, but by living a life of purpose, responsibility, service, and love. It is about reflecting God's image and leading with humility, protecting and providing for others, and living out the character of Christ in all areas of life. A man's identity is rooted in his relationship with God, and he is called to reflect that identity through his actions, leadership, and service to others. As men live out their calling, they become instruments of God's grace and reflect his love and truth to the world.